Well, Richard Spencer came to town, the neo-Nazi, the Mr. Sieg Heil. It's gotten around the news quite a bit. He was here on Monday with his little white nationalist group, the Atlantic. It's the Atlantic, right, Daniel? Yeah. Has the article and the video you can check out. And well, here's just one of the clips. You'll recall Heil Hitler literally meant Hail Hitler, and Sieg Heil, Hail Victory. So anyhow, here's Richard Spencer with his little group of white nationalists, actually at the Ronald Reagan building. Here he is.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
These guys are doing the one-arm salute here all around the room. They're holding up the Hitler salute. And, here's another, this is clip number 2. This is Richard Spencer talking about, the white race.
No one will honor us for losing gracefully. No one mourns the great crimes committed against us. For us, it is conquer or die.
Right. And here he is talking about what it is to be white.
To be white is to be a striver, a crusader, an explorer, and a conqueror. We build, we produce, we go upward. And we recognize the central lie of American race relations. We don't exploit other groups. We don't gain anything from their presence. They need us and not the other way around.
And here he is finally saying America is a white nation.
America was, until this past generation, a white country designed for ourselves and our posterity. It is our creation. It is our inheritance, and it belongs to us.
More Hitler salutes in the meantime. So one guy comes up to one of the Hitler saluting guys and goes, "There's somebody behind you with a camera." So I shouldn't laugh. The Stephen Rosenfeld over at Alternet. Soon after Spencer started slamming the mainstream media, he jeered, "Perhaps we should refer to them in the original German?" And the crowd shouted back. Now, do you think the average person knows enough German to know the Nazi-era word for lying press? Well, Richard Spencer said, he talked about he said, perhaps we should refer to them in the original German. The crowd shouted back, "Lügenpresse!" And, then he said, America was, until this, as I just played, until this last generation, a white country designed for ourselves and our posterity. It is our creation, our inheritance. It belongs to us. We have seen an explosion in hate crimes. In Germany in the 1930s, Stephen Rosenfeld writes over at Alternet in an article titled As Trump Builds His Authoritarian Presidency, Echoes of 1930s Germany and 1950s McCarthyism Abound. In Germany, Nazi-supporting paramilitary groups created their own arrest, detention, and torture stations during the first year of Hitler's rule. The authorities didn't stop them, and most of the American journalists stationed there at the time didn't want to conclude that paramilitary violence was part of a larger societal trend. What those outside targeted circles in Germany didn't see at the time were the steps being taken to start transforming a democratic republic to authoritarian rule. During the first months of Hitler's rule, German authorities told foreign journalists and diplomats that attacks by fascist thugs were outliers and would soon end. There were even official denunciations by the government, but it didn't stop. Those who did see it for what it was were frequently dismissed as too political, prejudiced, and shrill. Finally, we have Richard Spencer, the neo-Nazi, saying, or the white supremacist, whatever he calls himself, "I do think we have a psychic connection. You can say a deeper connection with Donald Trump in a way that we simply do not have with most Republicans." Yeah, I think so. So the New York Times then asked the question. The country now finds itself at a particular dangerous moment with advocates of discrimination and hate emboldened as they have not been for decades. Given the danger of violence and bigotry these groups pose, why then would Mr. Trump, who is so offended by the Hamilton cast's plea for tolerance, remain silent? Mr. Trump can find more time to rebuke legitimate satire, but not the hateful speech being wielded. Well, let me share with you, I've shared this before, but it's worth revisiting. I wrote this back in November of 2005. You can find it on our website at thomhartmann.com. It's a book review of a book by Milton Mayer. It's titled, They Thought They Were Free. Milton Mayer in the early 1940s after World War II was a reporter in Chicago. He was Jewish, a very, very good reporter. And he traveled to Germany after the war to figure out who were these Germans who allowed this to happen. Not the frenzied, Sieg Heilers. Who were the average Germans? Who were, and he talked to a baker, he talked to a construction worker, he talked to a college professor. None of these people had been active during the Hitler time in supporting Hitler. They also had not been active in the opposition. They simply conducted their business throughout all those years. And he was like, what the heck is going on? He wanted to know. So he opens the book by noting that he was prepared to hate the Nazis he was going to meet. But he wrote, he discovered that they were just as human as the rest of us. This is Milton Mayer, what he said. He's passed away, by the way, now. He said, I liked them. I couldn't help it. Again and again, as I sat or walked with one or another of my 10 Nazi friends, I was overcome by the same sensation that had got in the way of my newspaper reporting in Chicago in years before in the 1930s. I liked Al Capone. I liked the way he treated his mother. He treated her better than I treated mine. He writes about how, Milton Mayer then writes about how if he were to die tonight, at least he could look back on some good he had done. That his Nazi friends would never be able to die in peace, knowing the evil they had participated in, if even by acts of omission, that evil could never be wiped clean, and he dreaded that Americans would ever feel the same for acts that we may one day commit as a nation. He writes, and I quote, now I see a little better how Nazism overcame Germany, not by attack from without or by subversion from within, but with a whoop and a holler. It was what most Germans wanted, or under pressure of combined reality and illusion came to want. They wanted it, they got it, and they liked it. I came home a little afraid for my country, afraid of what it might want and get and like under combined pressure of reality and illusion. Pretty astonishing. We'll be back. So we're reading from Milton Mayer's book, They Thought They Were Free. Once again, Milton Mayer, a reporter from Chicago. I think it was the Sun or the Sun Times. Back in the 40s, it may have had a different name, and I don't have the book right in front of me right now. But he was a very well-respected reporter, and he went over to Germany and interviewed these average people. And this is from one of his interviews with a college professor, a German college professor, who throughout the Hitler years and the war and everything just kept teaching college. And he says, this separation of government from people, this widening of the gap took place so gradually and so insensibly, each step disguised, perhaps even intentionally, as a temporary emergency measure or associated with true patriotic allegiance or with real social purposes. And all the crises and reforms, and there were real reforms too, so occupied the people that they did not see the slow motion underneath of the whole process of government growing remoter and remoter. To live in this process is absolutely not to be able to notice it. Please try to believe me, unless one has a much greater degree of political awareness, acuity, than most of us ever had the occasion to develop. Each step was so small, so inconsequential, so well explained, or on occasion regretted, that unless one were detached from the whole process from the beginning, unless one understood what the whole thing was in principle, what all these little measures that no patriotic German could resent must someday lead to, one no more saw it developing from day to day than a farmer in a field sees the corn growing, until one day it is over his head. Pastor Niemöller, again, this is his college professor, Nazi friend that he talked to in Germany. Pastor Niemöller spoke for the thousands and thousands of men like me when he spoke too modestly of himself and said that when the Nazis attacked the communists, he was a little uneasy. But after all, he was not a communist, so he did nothing. And then they attacked the socialists, and he was a little uneasier. But still, he wasn't a socialist, and he did nothing. And then the schools and the press and the Jews and so on. And he was always uneasier, but still he did nothing. And then they attacked the church, and he was a churchman, and he did something, but then it was too late. Yes, I said, writes Milton Mayer. You see, my colleague went on, one doesn't see exactly where or how to move. Believe me, this is true. You wait for the next and the next. You wait for the one great shocking occasion, thinking that others, when such a shock comes, will join you in resisting somehow. You don't want to act or even to talk alone. You don't want to go out of your way to make trouble. Why not? Well, you're not in the habit of doing it. And it's not just fear of standing alone that restrains you. It is also genuine uncertainty. Uncertainty is a very great and important factor. And instead of decreasing as time goes on, it grows. Outside in the streets, in the general community, everyone seems happy. One hears little protest, certainly sees none. You know, in France or Italy, there are slogans against the government painted on the walls and fences. But in Germany, outside of the great cities, perhaps, there's not even this. In my university community, in my own community, you speak privately to your colleagues, some of whom certainly feel as you do. But what do they say? They say, it's not so bad. You're seeing things. You're an alarmist. And you are an alarmist. You are saying that this must lead to that, and you can't prove it. These are the beginnings, yes, but how do you know for sure when you don't know the end? And how do you know or even surmise the end? On the one hand, your enemies, the law, the regime, the party intimidate you. On the other hand, your colleagues poo-poo you as pessimistic or even neurotic. But the one great shocking occasion, when tens or hundreds of thousands will join you in the streets, that one occasion never comes. That's the difficulty. If the last and worst act of the whole regime had come immediately after the first and smallest, thousands, yes, millions would be sufficiently shocked if, let us say, the gassing of the Jews in 43 had come immediately after the German firm sticker on the windows of non-Jewish shops in 33. But of course, this isn't the way it happens. In between come all the hundreds of little steps, some of them imperceptible, each of them preparing you not to be shocked by the next. Step C is not so much worse than step B, and if you didn't make a stand at step B, then why should you at step C? And so on for step D. And then one day, too late, your principles, if you were ever sensible of them, all rush in upon you. The burden of self-deception has grown too heavy, and some minor incident, in my case, it was my little boy, hardly more than a baby, saying, "Jew, swine." Suddenly it collapses all at once, and you see that everything has changed, and changed completely under your nose. The world you live in, your nation, your people, is not the world you were in at all. The forms are all there, all untouched, all reassuring. The houses, the shops, the jobs, the mealtimes, the visits, the concerts, the cinema, the holidays. But the spirit, which you never noticed because you made the lifelong mistake of identifying it with the forms, the spirit has changed. Now you live in a world of hate and fear. And the people who hate and fear do not even know it themselves. When everyone is transformed, no one is transformed. Now you live in a system which rules without responsibility even to God. He wraps it up. He says, I do not see, even now, how we could have stopped it. Many, many times since it happened, I've pondered that pair of great maxims, principis obsta and finem rispus, resist the beginnings and consider the end. But one must foresee the end in order to resist or even see the beginnings. One must foresee the end clearly and certainly. And how is this to be done by ordinary men or even by extraordinary men? This is from They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer. And in the meantime, Donald Trump has called the press in and dressed them down. And and Steve Bannon, meanwhile, is saying, darkness is good. Dick Cheney, Darth Vader, Satan, that's power. It only helps us when the liberals get it wrong, when they're blind to who we are and what we're doing. Right. And meanwhile, Trump, this over the Daily Kos, Trump invites network executives, anchors, and reporters to a effing firing squad. Trump started with CNN. This one source said of the meeting, Trump started with CNN President Jeff Zucker and said, "I hate your network. Everyone at CNN is a liar and you should be ashamed." Trump kept saying, "We're in a room full of liars, the deceitful, dishonest media who get it all wrong." He addressed everyone in the room, calling the media dishonest, deceitful liars. Now, this is a leak, so it may or may not be factual, but this is astonishing if it is factual.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program. Call 202-808-9925.
Today, he's meeting with the New York Times. He called it off for a while. Now it's back on. This is that beginning that Mayer was talking about, in my opinion.